chat, which I realize is a bit of a polarizing name. We've been thinking a lot about how to bring people together at this time of, social distancing and separation. And that need combined with something that I have wanted to think through for a while, which is how do we get our amazing members to hear more from each other and to hear what people are doing? I put a lot of time into union work, and then sometimes I'm almost embarrassed to not know anything about someone's scholarly expertise. And so this is a great way, I hope, for us to hear from union members about what it is that they're working on that has some power to illuminate something in our current predicament, to say the least. And so we've chosen and asked and had our invitations accepted a very broad set of speakers, and we'll continue to do these as long as people are interested. I will say, and this is already coming up, I see on the Zoom, and please, those of you who are just a name, I would encourage you to become a face too. Part of why I think it's important to do this is to center our humanity. I think at this time when we receive a lot of emails from, for example, the university that are a little bit robotic and don't necessarily mention the fact that this is a tremendous time of dislocation and upheaval and illness and loss. And so to me, making sure we remember that we're all connecting on a human level is important. And so on that note, I love seeing your pets and your kids and your name Poop that your young daughter put on your Zoom account, Sean Mitchell. All of that to me reminds us that we are human. So as I like to say at the end of meetings, open the doors, let your kids in. I love seeing your cats and dogs. So, you don't have to deny all the elements of your humanity as we go through this. I will put in the chat box a link to the other upcoming talks, and I'll mention them at the end. But I don't want to go much further without introducing our speaker, and we'll hear from him. And I will say that the speakers are selected to have something to say about what we're going through now. I kind of feel like it's the best of the university in that it's such a diverse set of perspectives. So from, economics and inequality and race to food safety. And many of us have been really enjoying hearing from our Rutgers experts that have really been in the media. Janet Golden will speak about the 1918 flu pandemic, which I don't know about you guys, but I've been thinking, I had two grandmothers who lived to be quite old. I didn't ask either of them a darn thing about the 1918 flu pandemic. I asked them about the wars and all that other stuff. I never asked them about that, and I sure wish I had now. But what I will do is introduce our speaker very, very briefly, because you've heard enough from me already. Bill Rodgers is professor of public policy. He's chief economist at the Eldridge Center for Workforce Development, and he is an esteemed and accomplished economist who's done a number of things, including serving as chief economist for the U.S. Department of Labor and a number of other things. He's widely published. He's well regarded and well known in policy circles. His research, I think, can be considered by any measure extremely high impact. He really bridges economics and public policy. And he's going to talk to us a bit about the disparate impact and the disparate racial impact of the crisis that we're currently in. And we left it really open. We asked Bill to speak for maybe about 15 minutes, and then we'll take questions and comments, which will probably be some combination of putting your name in the chat box and waving at us, and we'll figure that out. And for those of you that would like Bill to be bigger, you can go ahead and put it on speaker view, or you can pin I believe if you click on the three dots over a person, you'll be able to pin them and sort of keep them large on your screen. And I believe, Bill, at some point we'll have some visuals, and we hope the screen sharing will work. I think it will. So on that note, it's just, I'm really gratified to see so many of you, and I will hand it over to Bill. And I can't thank you enough, Bill, for just right away saying yes and agreeing to do this. I think you have something important to say, so thank you.
Well, Becky, thank you so much for asking me to spend some time with folks this evening. This is starting to get closer to my bedtime, so if my energy level starts to wane a little bit, you've been forewarned. The other warning I have to also share is that, and you opened it up to allowing pets potentially rearing their cute little heads. We have 3 cats here, a tortie kitten and a tuxedo kitten, and we have an older Sphinx cat. So the Sphinx cat likes to get on my shoulder at times. So
that sounds good to me.
Okay. I've been doing this with my students now. Let's see if I'm starting to really get mastering moving around with the technology here. So what I want to share or start off with, and we'll get to race and ethnicity and gender to a degree in a bit, but I'm going to start off broadly, and then we'll get more narrow. And there are two kind of setup stories. One's a quote, and then one's a personal experience I had when I worked for President Clinton. But the first takes us back to 1935 in January. And this is in his message to Congress on the Economic Security Program in January of 1935, which formed the basis for the landmark Social Security Act. President Franklin D. Roosevelt said, no one can guarantee this country against the dangers of future depressions, but we can reduce these dangers. We can eliminate many of the factors that cause economic depressions, and we can provide the means of mitigating their results. We pay now for the dreadful consequence of economic insecurity, and dearly. That was back in 1935. Coming forward and sharing a kind of a more contemporary experience that I think also connects to what President Roosevelt said. And fortunately, we didn't go into a major recession at that time. But in the year 2000, when I was working for Alexis Herman as her chief economist at the U.S. Labor Department, at that time, and I'm very proud of it, I was the chief economist when we had the lowest unemployment rate at that time ever on record. I won't ascribe any causality to it. But we ended up having some youth opportunity grants. These were part of Secretary Herman's youth opportunity movement. And it was basically investing in communities where there was high levels of poverty, high levels of crime, but with a particular focus on young people. And what was a really neat thing that happened was President Clinton decided to use his Friday radio address to unveil these grants that were going to various communities. And I went over. I was staffing it because it was in my area, and that was amazing. It was a who's who of African American and leaders, political and economic leaders. But what was the most amazing thing was President Clinton got up and he spoke before he did the radio address. He spoke for about 20 minutes, and he spoke on his remembrances of 1969, where in 1969, at that time, we had just also at that time celebrated the longest peacetime economic expansion. And his comments to us were, it takes a very, very difficult, challenging, can be very difficult, it's very challenging to create prosperity and to sustain prosperity and to build prosperity. And particularly he was talking about, right, all of the sort of social and economic pieces of legislation that were passed during the 1960s to address discrimination, to address inequality, and particularly child poverty. But he then warned us and he said, you can't be complacent, because he remembered that summer of '69, how we had just set the record, and then several months later, almost at the snap of a finger, cities were burning. And that prosperity, came to a screeching halt there. And today, that almost has this have a little bit of a feel, where what I want to show you, start off with that conversation, is in talking about where we are today, where we literally did, the economy really did come to a screeching halt, where the green bar shows you in February 2020, we had an unemployment rate of about 3.5%. This was at that time now had broken the records of the 1990s expansion, we were below, at or below 4.5%, 4% or below for several years. And the thing that was the beauty of having an unemployment rate that low, not so much of being that low, but being that low for such a long period of time, like we had in the 1990s, is that it began to provide opportunity for groups on the economic ladder that typically are the last ones to benefit from an economic boom. And actually Richard Freeman, one of my advisors from Harvard, economist, we actually had some of our work profiled in the New York Times about how the 1990s boom really improved opportunities for young, less educated minority men. But then, so we're at 3.5% in February, but then we started hearing about the closing down, the shutting down of the economy. And initially people thought, oh, the March unemployment rate was just going to be sky high. Well, the problem with the March unemployment rate was the survey in which the time of the survey, when it occurred, it was the week before we started seeing all those massive increases in the unemployment insurance claims. And so what ended up coming out was a slight tick up, only about 4.4%. And so people are very, very concerned about what's going to happen for this month, its current month. And to give you a potential eyeball as to what we might see, that red bar is my estimate, where I use the unemployment insurance claims and UI claims. These are what people have been filing for to get their unemployment insurance benefits. Right. These are viewed as the best leading indicator in the economy in terms of economic conditions. And what I do is I basically have built a historical relationship between the unemployment rate, the official unemployment rate, and UI claims, and basically use that to generate a prediction of what the unemployment rate could be. And so I'm at around 18%. Many of the large banks, they've been coming in around 10 to 12%. You have the Federal Reserve out of St. Louis, Jim Bullard, the president there. They're about 30%. How does this compare to the past? Well, the black bar shows you the unemployment rate at its peak during the Great Recession, during June of 2009. Now, what's the interesting thing here is that 9.5%, that took us several years to get to. Okay, that took us several years to get to. What we're experiencing now is what President Clinton talked about in that comment I shared with you. It's what President Roosevelt was talking about in his address. That we are probably, when the jobs report comes out next early May for April, we're probably going to be in the double-digit unemployment rate, and that unemployment rate is also not going to include people who were working full time but now are working part time. So the underemployment numbers are also going to start to tick up, and they actually did start to tick up last month. Now, this is the overall sort of top of the line picture, but what we can also do is we break it down by race and ethnicity and gender, and what this is showing you is that that minorities, people of color, particularly Blacks and Latinos, they're already bearing the brunt of the downturn, and that many of the jobs, or particularly the industries that have been shuttered, right, they have a larger percentage of minorities in those. And then there's also kind of this double whammy effect that you have also the occupations that are really on the front line fighting, right, the virus and helping people survive, also have a large presence of women and minorities. So there is this kind of double whammy of effect that we see. And again, the red bars just to illustrate you potentially where we are. There's a a range, and so the African American unemployment rate could be at around 20%. It's probably, my range is probably like 15 to 20%. Moving on, when we go get closer to home, there's not data that is published by race and ethnicity and gender for state unemployment rates in this sort of real time, but I did sort of generate an estimate for us for what the New Jersey unemployment rate could be. We're at around 19%. Again, just the switch was just like flipped off, and we've seen massive layoffs nationally and throughout the region. So what tomorrow, the new claims that will be for the week after April 4th up until the 15th or 16th. I'll get those at 8:30 in the morning and redo my estimates. But but that's where we are. And so one of the challenges that we have in thinking about these numbers, that this 19% is for the overall state. And then we start asking, well, what might that unemployment rate or jobless rate be for people of color, be for African Americans? Well, there is, even at the state level, the work I've done, they suggest that this 2-to-1 ratio between the Black unemployment rate and the white unemployment rate, or the overall unemployment rate, typically does hold. So potentially, the African American unemployment rate could be double that 19%. And again, this is only including people who are actively saying they're searching for a job, because one of the dynamics that could occur is that there are going to be a lot of people who might, when they answer the survey, they may say, I've stopped searching, either A, because there ain't any jobs, or either B, I've stopped searching because I don't want to put myself out there in terms of being exposed to the virus, and then potentially getting sick and getting some of my family members sick. So I think the key thing to think about with these basic indicators, again, is this notion that, right, it took us to get 10% in the Great Recession. It took us several years, right? We're getting to double-digit unemployment and drops in participation in basically 2-3 months, right? And that's creating a great deal of stress and stress and just sadness, right, for so many families. The other thing that I think is also important to remember is also the underemployment that is occurring here. And then another thing that's really important too is, even though we've had this amazing prosperity over the last decade, there were signs there were indicators suggesting that American families were going into this downturn in some very precarious positions. There's a statistic that the Federal Reserve publishes from their survey of consumer welfare, and it's basically now about 40% of American households could not pay an unexpected bill of $400 if it came to them. So that's it's almost half of your household in the United States. And then some of you may have heard of the ALICE reports that are put together by United Way of Northern New Jersey, which I did a little bit of work with them on helping to create that concept. Well, we've been estimating that around 38 to 40% of New Jersey households are in this at or below the ALICE threshold. And just real quickly, the ALICE threshold basically captures the share of households in New Jersey that don't have enough income or resources to cover their finances, to cover their expenditures. And the tough thing that happened with ALICE in New Jersey is, since 2010, when they began to generate these estimates and going forward, instead of going down as you would expect during the best economy since World War II, the ALICE population in New Jersey actually went up. That as the economy got better, the share of people who were ALICE in New Jersey worsened. So we really need this, and I'm not calling it stimulus, this rescue package that Congress has passed, and we need a fourth. sort of tranche to what's been done already. So how do we address racial inequality in this sort of now post COVID era? I still think that a lot of it is the same. If I had been talking with you before COVID, what I'm going to share with you and just give you a real quick summary comes from a chapter I published in a Russell Sage Foundation volume that was published at the end of last year, and I was asked to do the chapter on race and public policy. And so here's my quick sort of summary on what we need to be doing. And as I'm finish, when I finish, I'm going to talk about one of my colleagues, Hugh Price, who was the president of the National Urban League, and quote him or just mention something he had said, and then I'll say right now here is that much of what I'm going to share is not new. It's pulling together, right, a variety of agendas and that are out there. Because why do we need a comprehensive or a 360-degree approach? Well, number one, right, no single narrative fully explains persistent racial inequality. The challenge is that an ex-offender, young African-American male or woman who's a nonviolent drug offender, they face very different challenges than, let's say, some of my Rutgers students, young kids of color. And because of that, right, there's no silver bullet policy or policy agenda. And this is important because when I was even working on this chapter, my editors, who are good friends, they at times were still trying to push me into, okay, what's the one thing we need to do? What's the one thing we need to do? And I'm like, Harry, we've gotten to a point because we have been slowed down our investment in human priorities that the United Nations calls, right? That there's just no single bullet, right? That you need a whole set of bullets. And also those policies have to be coordinated. They have to be coordinated. And then the big thing too, or the other thing is that we're in it for the long term. We have to be in it for the long term. This is an issue that's been going on for multiple generations. It ain't going to be solved in one generation. My blueprint for narrowing racial inequality that I talk about in this chapter has 4 prongs to it. One is building human and social capital. Particularly, it starts in preschool and moves through college, such as expanding teenager opportunities overall, but also particularly in the career technical worlds or opportunities. Improving opportunity. Here, this is improving workplace equity. Is one example. Something that from where I was doing some work with the Institute for Social Justice in Newark, we came up with the idea: could you use forfeiture funds or sort of victim compensation funds? Could you plow those back into the communities from where the violence or the drug dealing was occurring? Because right now that doesn't happen. And then third is a sort of lessening overall inequality. That one of the things that's happened with racial inequality over my career there's been the following: that a larger portion of racial inequality is now because of general inequality. And the thought goes, or the idea goes, as follows: the average African American is at around the 35th, or their wage would correspond to around the 35th percentile of the white wage distribution. And so what has happened is we've had globalization, immigration and trade. We've had technology. David O'Toole at MIT has shown that those have contributed to growing income inequality overall, regardless of race. But since a larger share of African American workers are in that lower part of the skill distribution or that wage distribution, right? That they're stagnating in wages, their loss in wage power has a more disproportionate impact on the black-white wage gap. So some of the agenda that I talk about in this paper is one of improving improving the strength of unions, improving membership, improving unions' ability to to work to address workplace inequality. This administration, I'm not trying to be political, but this administration has done a number of things to continue to erode, again, regardless of where your race or gender, but begun to erode worker power. And at one level, right, this growing income inequality we've seen, we have, as my work with the National Academy of Social Insurance, it has put more risk back on individuals, back on families. And so part of the problem we're going to be seeing, and we're already seeing, right, is families heading to food pantries. Families are going to also then, at the end of the month, going to need help with their electrical bills, their utility bills. It's going to be this cascading effect. This is what I saw when I was working on the United Way, and as on the faculty at the College of William and Mary. I was there before Hurricane Katrina hit. We had our own mini Katrina, and power was out for 3 weeks, and you could just see the cascading effect, and you could see how families of color, with their lower to moderate income families in Williamsburg, they bore the brunt of the economic downturn. But all low-wage, low-income families did, but especially people of color. So part of this really approach, this blueprint, does have approaches that help all workers, and then fourth, fighting discrimination. Budgets for the EEOC have not kept up, and so there's basically large backlogs on cases that people have brought forward to them. There was my group. We had tried to get the EEOC to have in the Office of Federal Contract Compliance. We had tried to get the contractors to provide not only employment data but wage data, so we could up front, right, start to be more aggressive about identifying wage discrimination or wage inequalities within firms. But this administration was successfully killed that initiative. Looking forward, and I'll finish up, and I'll look forward to hearing your comments and your questions. But
yeah, we'll take a look at this, and then we'll move to get a little interactive. This is great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So basically, looking forward, the point that I kind of feel is, and it comes from a lot of the work I've been doing, whether it be coaching young people and seeing their families, but and seeing how this president and how Bernie Sanders have been successful. But people feel bullied by globalization and technology, and even growing diversity. So very, very insecure. But what's important, what I try to press when I'm talking publicly, is that this is not new for women and people of color in their communities. The economic insecurity. And in fact, one of my colleagues, he's the chief economist for the AFL-CIO, Bill Spriggs, a number of years ago, we got to the point where, African Americans and people of color, they're the canary in the coal mine. They really are the canary in the coal mine, but we've largely have ignored them. And so, going forward, as I said, we need this fourth package. We need to educate Americans about the weak state of labor policy and get them engaged. We have to build support for investing in human priorities, particularly social insurance. That's why, we're in a better shape than we were during the Great Depression, but we've fallen behind in maintaining our social insurance infrastructure. And particularly, we have to provide protections for gig and contract workers, and also public sector workers that in many states are already talking about budget deficits. And I can, if I sort of connect the dots, or you look in a crystal ball, there could be furloughs and layoffs in that area, and that's very problematic, because the public sector is where a large number of women and minorities got a toehold into the middle class. And so there's a few other items there that we need that need to be strengthened. But the thing that Hugh Price said to me a number of years ago, he basically said, "Bill, we know what we need to do. Like, what I've described to you is, a lot of this is not new. It's just having the political courage." And I was just talking with a good friend tonight he's very lathered up and angry. And I said, "Paul, you got to turn this into action. You have to turn this into action over the next few months." So again, thank you for inviting me to spend this evening with you, and I look forward to your
Thank you.
reactions.
And if you, I think you can stop screen sharing, and then we can hear some questions. And I have a couple in the chat box which I can relay to you. But if anybody wants to wave at us and ask a question in your own voice, and those of you that are camera shy, I encourage you to come on and show your faces, regardless of what kind of Zoom background you do or don't have. And thank you, Bill. That was great. That was really very illuminating and also necessary, right? As these numbers come out and we see what this really looks like. So let me ask one question. This is from Sky, who says thank you. And this crosses, I think, the race and the youth lines, about a question about youth employment programs, right? So there's a huge, I think it's 80,000 young people were usually in a youth employment program in New York City in the summer, and it's been cut. My understanding is there's some combination of budgetary reasons and not being sure what kind of work we'll be able to do. Young people or anybody will be able to do if we're in lockdown. I think a lot of those jobs were in parks and things like that. What do you think about youth employment programs? I guess I'll extrapolate from the question a bit and say in their ability to help address some of the labor market situation that you've described.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, there's research that has been going on, that's been done for, decades, starting with Job Corps, and showing that, it has very, very positive impacts on raising the odds of graduating and high school, raising the odds of going on to college and so forth. And so, it's imperative. It's actually one of my, in my kind of framework, that there has to be a recommitment, and especially it's going to be important going forward. We do have to, my feeling is we do have to kind of listen to the scientists, and my feeling is that we've got to get to that. If I hear a scientist say to me, okay, Bill, we've gotten to that point where, if people start to reduce that physical distancing, that's what I like to say. I don't want to say social distance. I like physical distancing. One of my colleagues at the New School said, but if we get to a point where that's minimized, the chance of someone relapsing or the chance of someone passing things back on, then I think that's where we start to open those types of opportunities back, and hourly paid workers, and then young people. For me, these are high priority groups to get back into the economy.
Thanks. Anyone want to ask a question in their own voice, so it's not just me? I see Donna. Go ahead, Donna. Make sure you're not muted. You want to introduce yourself too?
Hi, I'm Donna. I teach in the history department. I'm an associate professor of history, and I do 20th century African-American history. I had kind of two related questions. One is, I was just so struck, partially because I live in Philadelphia, but I'm also from Pennsylvania, at how high the unemployment rate is in Pennsylvania. That it was 34%, I think 19% in New Jersey, and 17% in New York. And you were saying that likely African-American unemployment is double, because I've been especially concerned about what's going to happen in Philadelphia, given the rate of poverty here. And my related question to that is, there's so many comparisons being made now with the Depression. The mainstream media is almost afraid to use the word. But I'm curious about what you think as an economist about what it means just to bring the entire economy to a halt, along with that, global piece and the interruption of supply chains. I know it's always hard. Historians are terrible at prediction. I'm not sure about economists.
We're pretty bad too.
We can all speculate, since it's a
Yeah. No, thank you for your questions. Yeah, the Pennsylvania unemployment rate that I showed you. I mean, let's say that's an average, and there's a real big range around that. My hunch, is, and there were, and I've talked with a variety of colleagues about not just Pennsylvania, but all these different state unemployment rates, and there's a lot of noise in them. I think they do contain some good information, but what is some of the noise? So it could be like the Pennsylvania rate is possibly higher because Pennsylvanians were able to get into the UI to the system and register for unemployment insurance. There were a number of states that it took several weeks before people could get in. You know, you were hearing a lot of stories about the inability to, they would be on the phone for hours, or the computer would just freeze up or crash on them. So, you know, so some of that increase, and I don't know for sure, but some of that higher level in Pennsylvania could be due to that people were able to get registered.
It wasn't written in a 1970s programming language that nobody knows, like the New Jersey system.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's in the unemployment insurance system is a system that, I mean, I had my first stint at the Labor Department back in the mid 1990s, and there were already recommendations on what we needed to do in terms of unemployment insurance reform, but they just that for a variety of reasons that they just have not happened. But you know, but the other thing too about, I guess, why Pennsylvania's might be higher, you know, is let's look at did the Pennsylvania governor, were they more aggressive about again, really, as your second question, you know, shutting the economy down, and then also the kinds of industries that were affected. So those are the places where I would start to look. But you know, and actually, this is the week that the survey, the BLS, or the survey that they use to generate or estimate the unemployment rate it's out right now. And so, you know, I think most economists that I read or see, you know, we're bracing for an unemployment rate that's going to be, you know, north of 10%. Will it be up close to mine 18? You know, we just don't know. And on your second question, yeah, you know, this is, I know, for my life, I was talking with my parents who were in their early 80s. This is unprecedented to literally turn the switch, right, off on the economy and economic activity. And as one of my colleagues, we were on a call the other day, you know, we are still at in their eyes, and I tend to agree, from the economic fallout, we are still at the beginning. You know, we need to see, you know, how effective these, you know, the checks will be, how effective unemployment insurance will be. But the other big piece here is just the psychological piece of where you had, you know, most Americans, like, just going about living their lives. And, you know, and now they can't touch people, you know, touch their loved ones. They can't spend time with their loved ones. You know, that's a toll that, right, we just can't, you know, you can't put a dollar value on that. You know, that's to me, that's the crime.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else want to jump in with a question? I have one in the chat box I can relay, but yeah, Sean, why don't you introduce yourself and go off mute?
Hey, thank you so much for that. I'm Sean Mitchell, Associate Professor of Anthropology at the Newark campus. And just, I guess, you know, lots good. One question, do you know those stats? How do they capture, or how well do they capture undocumented workers, or all of the, you know, many workers who, you know, in the global South would be called informal workers, which is, you know, just, it's like an enormous, you know, just, you know, I'm not an economist, but, you know, you like walk around a city and like people washing dishes and cutting hair and delivering food. My sense is that probably a lot of these people aren't even showing up in those stats. Do we know?
Correct. The only they could show up in the stats if they answer the survey. So first, the household in which they live has to be drawn, because the survey, the current population survey, it's a stratified random sample of about 55 to 60,000 American households. And so the way someone who's undocumented would show up would be, you know, would be that they would be in a household that gets selected, and then they would choose to answer the survey themselves, or their reference person in the household would. So, but you're spot on. I was talking with a colleague earlier today about just, again, groups that are that we're missing, or that that because of the situation they're not getting services and getting the health care they need, and then also getting the social insurance that they need.
Thanks. And Zainat put a question in about African American as college is a sort of path to reducing inequality, and whether this is again, everybody loves to ask for predictions. So whether you think we'll see fewer African Americans either entering college or being able to complete college, and whether that would contribute to greater racially stratified economic inequality in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's anything, actually, I should say the part two, which is, is there anything a university like Rutgers could do to stop that from happening as a major state university?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So what's been interesting around African American college graduates, in the late 1970s, the earnings gap between Black and white college graduate men was basically zero. But through the 1980s, by the end of the 1980s, the pay differential between Black and white college graduate men actually grew to about 18 to 20%. And it has not dissipated much since then. Some work that an Economic Policy Institute colleague of mine, we redid a lot of that work and updated it. And we basically have a conclusion, and this includes Black women, that the relative status of African Americans is basically back to what it was in 1979 in terms of earnings. And then if you, some colleagues have also incorporated into their estimates the effects of incarceration. And when you do that, they estimate the relative status takes you back to about 1960. So that's the negative side of things. The positive side is that there has been continued narrowing in educational differences, and a large part is with African Americans going on and getting college degrees, and so that has helped to have a narrowing force on earnings inequality, on the earnings gap. Now, what's going to happen with regards to the effect, life after COVID? Again, I think we're still early on. I think the big question is going to be basically aid. Right? What's going to be the kind of aid packages young people are going to get? Are they because presumably aid, the need for aid is going to rise, and so where are the sources of aid? Pell Grants. That we're going to need to place more money into the Pell Grants. Most likely, probably have to make people more eligible, right? Make it easier to be eligible. And then, so for a school like Rutgers, this is part of our mission, right? And that we are going to have to figure out ways to fulfill that mission, and we're going to have to figure out ways to fulfill that mission, whether it be providing aid. I'm on the board of a small liberal arts college called McDaniel College. It's in Maryland, and 30% of our young people there are first generation. And we've already begun to talk about what we're going to do. Because for us, we're 1,600 kids, and and there's going to be that demographic cliff into 2025 of the falling off of the number of kids going on to college. So our survival really does hinge upon our ability to now retain, because there's going to be you're going to have also retention issues of kids that are coming after this. But then also to attract young people going forward. And so I think one thing that Rutgers will have to do is really we're going to have to beef up our value proposition, right? For why it is important to come here. And I think for me, what I love about this place is the incredible diversity that we have. And I have friends who teach at Middlebury. Oh yeah, we're diverse. We're like, no. We truly are, and that going forward, in terms of how we live, the global life we live in, and what he's now president of Columbia, when he was at Michigan and argued the affirmative action case. We talk about want people to be culturally competent. You know, this is where we make young people lifelong learners, independent thinkers, and responsible citizens. And particularly one of those is helping them be culturally competent. So, you know, I think, you know, with us moving to the Big Ten, that has raised our national and international profile. And we, you know, we have a new president who I'm very excited for. So I think we're in a potentially very good position to, you know, to come out of this being even stronger.
That's great. Thanks. And I'm going to ask you, I know it's tempting for everyone as soon as you heard from who you want to hear from to pop off, but I don't want to see all your names and faces go away just yet. That's actually a great segue. I just wanted to say a couple things before I properly thank Bill. One is just to give you guys a sense of a couple things that your union is working on that we hope you'll keep in touch about. One is obviously you've seen the hiring freeze or potential freeze put on our part-time lecturers, and we hope you'll sign the petition that their chapter has put forward, but also talk to your colleagues about the important work that our part-time lecturers do for very little compensation and how that directly affects the work of the full-timers, the learning of our students who we all prioritize. So I hope you'll pay attention to that. And then the other thing is Bill talked about federal rescue packages, and that includes money to the states and money for higher education. And we're working with our national unions to have influence over these rescue packages and to make sure that our values and the values of public higher education are represented in material ways in those rescue packages. So we hope you'll keep in touch with your union about all of those things and so much more that we're doing right now. I also really need to shout out, and I'm sorry if anyone's on the phone and I don't have your face, but our union staff are amazing. And in this absolute crisis, they have done so much night, day, weekends. So I know we have Patrick Nolan, Sherry Wolf, Sharif Ibrahim, BJ Walker, Kathleen Shannon, definitely on here. They're about double that many, working their butts off, doing so much for us day in and day out, and we owe them a huge amount. And I want to preview the next few of these. We have some exciting ones lined up that we're not ready to announce yet, but next week we'll have our own Janet Golden, historian emerita, actually, just about fully retired, who will speak on the 1918 pandemic. Then we'll come back the following week with Don Schaffner. You may have seen him in the media. He's our food safety expert, and he's going to tell you you do not need to wash your apples with soap. But he will tell us what you need to do to keep your food safe. I'm happy that I don't need to wash my apples with soap, frankly. And then the following one, Naomi Klein on disaster capitalism, which maybe will start to be called coronavirus capitalism as we look at what will be made of this crisis and by whom and for whom. And so those are the next three, and you'll be able to RSVP to them in the same way. And we think we'll have Facebook streaming probably going in the next one or so. And I just want to thank all of you guys for spending a little time with us, and especially Bill for stepping up to the plate, saying something very powerful that really speaks to the moment we're in from a Rutgers perspective, a New Jersey perspective, and a national perspective. So thank you all for joining us by our imaginary, I guess, fireside, the imaginary community of Fireside. And I see everyone's putting their little applause icons up. So thank you so much, you guys all. Please stay safe. Try to stay healthy. I know that's easier said than done. And please keep in touch with your union and let us know what's going on, how we can help you. We're here for you. If you have ideas for other speakers, we would love hearing from our members. So please keep in touch. Please stay safe. And thank you for being here tonight. And thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Becky. Thanks. All right. Marvelous. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.